45 setback from the residential property lines. I like that. The 30-foot landscape buffers. I just don't know. Is that going to be too restrictive?
So a 30-foot landscape setback can include parking structures and paving.
Well, you really want to have a big buffer between the business and just the,
But it's not, we're not looking at businesses, we're from building to building, right?
Well, it depends on if you're looking at the Olathe ordinance.
That's what I'm looking at now.
You are looking at Olathe?
Yes.
Then yes, you are looking. If you are adjacent to a commercial zoning or mixed use or industrial zoning, they have specific requirements for a side setback of 75 feet, of which at least 30 ought to be landscape buffers. Within the rest of that 45 feet, you can put parking structures and paving and that sort of thing. But you're talking about 75 feet to your.
We have that now, don't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
15 foot or 20 foot?
15 feet.
15
Is
foot.
it? 175.
15 feet if you're next to industrial or commercial. However, where we're a little more, I think, if I'm not mistaken,
25 feet.
we have the 25 feet, right,
To
exactly.
lower density
Lower
residential.
density residential. So if you have a multifamily adjacent to a single family, you have to increase that 15 foot to 25 foot. And it looks like Olathe is basically saying you have to have 25 foot from any residential property line unless you do an RP3, in which case you may be able to reduce it to 15 feet.
Which one of these do the staff think is going to be easier to work with on this side thing? Because that Olathe one looks complicated to me, but.
The thing that concerns me about the Olathe one is when you start saying 25 feet from a residential property line can occur in the middle of a RP3 development. An Eagles Landing would be the ideal, it would be the perfect example, or Eagles Ridge, I mean, would be the perfect example. You know, under the Olathe zoning, you have to have 50 feet between your buildings.
Yeah.
Or 30 feet if you went through the planned unit development, with the flexibility here. If you went through our planned unit development, you reduce that down to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at this, the
So-
new Lee Summits is actually less restrictive than our current one.
Yes. But Olathe is more restrictive.
Maybe I've
They allow an
got-
exception for that 15 feet. We don't. We just have 25. Really?
We're okay where we are.
But they're
I
saying
agree.
it may be reduced to 15 feet, so you could have the exception of
Right.
meeting our current minimum standards, right?
Right, yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I mean, it really doesn't have to be. If you can,
If you want to write that flexibility in, but we might want to change the language on that.
could staff look at that
Yeah,
one?
we'll
Because
look
we like
that up.
Olathes, but it's a little too restrictive and a little convoluted and
I
confusing.
kinda like what we got so far, so.
Yeah, that's maybe the case. But Madam Chair, are you accepting questions from the audience?
We're not supposed to, but we can. It's not a public hearing, but since there's only two
Well,
people in
and
the audience.
I realize I'm merely a spectator here, but I do have a question on these side setbacks when you're talking about the zero clearances as to how this would, if it's possible here, without having a zero clearance somewhere in there, for the individual units to be sold with some ground instead of just as a condo unit. You know, like in a row, if you wanted to sell the strip, the one unit, you know, into four for sale units, if you don't have that, allow that zero lot line, you're not going to be able to sell the middle units.
Right.
They're not gonna wanna do that then, the zero light lines.
The way that we do that now,
Is you just condo the unit and you don't sell the ground. The ground is,
it's not right. The way that we do that now is through the PUD. The PUD allows you to do a zero lot line setback as long as it's an interior lot line. an interior side setback. So what our PUD ordinance says now is basically if you're along anywhere where you have an interior side setback, if you want to do lots on a townhouse development and it's a PUD, you can do zero lot line. But what we don't do is we don't say through the PUD, oh yeah, but then you have to increase that side setback that you have.
That doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the guy who bought the end unit.
Right.
We're trying to get around that. We're trying to get it where it's fair and equitable, and kind of what you're saying, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Where so that if it's sold, one guy doesn't get all of the grass and the other guy,
Well, I want to make sure that he can actually buy some grass, and he doesn't just have to buy his building.
The unit, right.
His unit. I want
So-
him to be able to buy some grass too.
so when you look at this with the side thing for the RP3 low density, could staff look at writing Olathes where we include a zero lot line, because we want to have that included in there? And maybe clean the language up a little bit?
Because that would,
Well, one thing
that would
to note,
encourage the individual unit ownership, which I think is something we want to encourage, rather than making all these rentals.
And we did that in
Do
the
you-
RP2. We need
Do
to
you
do
really want the individual owner to own the grass around it?
Yes. I want him to own a front yard and a backyard.
I would think that you would want that to really be owned by the association, so it's maintained at once, and it's continuously maintained.
I think you could look at it either way, but
Because the townhomes now, I'll use Eagles Ridge for example, which individual units are to be sold. The land around it is owned by the association, which is maintained by the association.
Everybody doesn't have to go out and mow their little square.
Exactly. That way, it's
that's a good point.
especially if you have residential development around it, you have the yard mowed all at once, and all the shrubbery mowed all at once, or taken care of all at once. So it continuously looks nice. You don't have one house that has,
you can have that in a single family
4-foot
development too.
Exactly. But you don't have one house with 4-foot weeds, the next unit doesn't. I mean, everything's mowed at once and maintained at once.
By having the individual ownership, you've got a little more freedom in what you do. If you put up a shed in your backyard, or a swing set, or whatever.
Could staff draw up two ways for us to have a choice in how this
Yes.
is written up? One way with the zero lot line and one way without the zero lot line. I think that the individual ownership is more important with the RP2 with the duplexes, because the person does want to own that grass behind them, because they look at that as more of a single family development versus a fourplex, which is more shared. So if you could draft it both ways, then we'll decide our next meeting how we prefer it. So moving along, the low density, we like everything for Lee Summit. We're going to blend the lot size with 4,000 square feet per unit, may be reduced to 3,000, similar to what we did RP2. Everything we like for Lee Summit, except we do prefer Olathes side yards, but staff is going to write two ways of including a zero lot line and not including it. And on the open space, we prefer Olathe.
12-foot White Street.
Oh, whoops, that's a mistake.
Okay. Like, well, it's a
Yeah,
tad bit narrow there.
It's a lane, yeah, sorry, 24.
Okay.
Okay, now we're gonna move on. I'm sorry, guys. Would everyone agree to stay maybe an extra half hour to get this done?
Yep.
George, are you okay?
I have to move it.
Unless my phone goes off, then
All right. Just because we want to try and get the zoning done.
I believe it's 6:30.
Okay, 6:30. We'll stop wherever we're at.
May I make a phone call to my
You sure may. We'll try and move along. Okay, medium density. And that's where the units per acre, that's where I'm looking at the, flip the page on the high density, and that's 12 in Lee Summit. And then it's 10 still. When you were talking about the units per acre, the maximum, I'm looking at Lee Summit, and I'm thinking the medium density probably shouldn't be the same as the low density. Shouldn't it be 12?
Well, didn't she say that
Yeah.
all of the items on Lee Summit and Blue Springs
right.
are the same for the medium and the
Page
below?
3, we just correlated because Olathe broke out low, medium, and high.
Mhm.
Blue Springs and Lee Summit just have essentially low and high.
So
Two
the only
levels.
changes on this page is.
Olathe has 3, so our low for Blue Springs and Lee Summit seem to compare most closely to.
So do we
Olathe's
wanna do a
medium.
low, medium, and high? I think if you
Good
do
question.
low, you don't wanna do low, high, you kinda have to.
That's what we have now, and that's exactly it. We go from MF 14 to MF 20. There's no between.
All right, if we're gonna do a medium, then it should be, have more units per acre than the low does. If the low is 10, then the medium should be 12, right? And then the high should be,
Right, and like Lee Summit, they have 10 or 12. That's it. You know, for example, Blue Springs has 14 or 20.
yeah.
Olathe has 12, 18, 29.
I'm thinking the medium, I don't know if, of course, half our crew's gone, but I'm thinking the medium should be 12, because that would be an increase for, that would be a step,
Okay.
you know, I mean, if you go
Sure.
10, 12, 14, and then
But
14,
your
the
high
high
is gonna be about 20. Your high should be around 20. So why don't you run the medium at 14?
Or you do 10, 14, 18. Going forwards. Or
Well,
10,
we never
15,
use
10,
the-
15,
We never
20.
use the 20 anyway. It's rarely used. If we did 18, that would actually be
Put them up by 4.
10, 14.
18.
Well, I'm
I'm
thinking,
I'm just making up numbers for being even.
Julie, you were looking at 14?
well, yes. I'm thinking 14 for the median, because when we had talked about zoning issues in the future, that would simplify it, correct? Because that way you're not, if property is zoned MF 14, then if it was given the median density, then it would be it would
Yeah.
correlate with what the current zoning is, correct?
Right.
Be less confusing, because if we made it 12, then you'd actually be downsizing.
So
the zone.
essentially, just for clarity's sake, if it's possible, Blue Springs technically has medium and high
Medium high.
currently.
We're at, correct, and we're gonna be
And
adding
we're
low.
essentially adding a low.
Which,
with that
which
RP3.
Paige was saying, you know, Lee Summit has garden apartments and some kinds of
Right.
development that we don't have and our current zoning doesn't address, so.
Because we
so
essentially don't
the
have a
low
low. Even though we call it low density multifamily, it's more in line with medium
Right,
that we're seeing in the other
Correct.
communities, so.
all right, so we wanna change that to 14, which isn't, actually is a lot higher than Lee Summit, but lower than Olathe. Okay, so it's kind of in the middle. And then on the lot size, do we wanna make the same exception we did with the low density where it's 4,000 square feet per unit and may go down to 3,000? That way it's still in compliance with our old code. Maybe
Well, that would be-
3,000?
If you go
I mean,
to,
that would be the units per acre would the math works.
if you go
It's 3,000.
with 14 units per acre and the median density, then the square feet per lot, in order to get 14 units per acre, it has to be 3,000.
So they could do under that, they could do, if they were doing 12, then they could come in under the MP4, the RP4. So we have to allow 3,000 or we can't get the density. So we have to say 4,000 square feet per unit, maybe 3,000. If they did the absolute highest density with the 14 units per acre, right?
Right. No, we're starting at 3.
You can start at 3,000.
I thought MF 14 was your low. I mean, not low density, I don't want to confuse this issue. Within the medium density multifamily district, I thought that 14 units per acre was what you had determined to be.
The maximum,
Right.
the maximum.
I thought it was the minimum.
Units per acre, no, it's the maximum. Because the maximum you can have in the low density is 10, the maximum you can have in the medium density is 14. So if you've got 12 units per acre, then you would have to come in under the RP4, and in that
Right.
case,
Why would you,
But see, then
if
we,
you only wanted 12 units per acre, why would you come in at the RP4 level? Why wouldn't you just say, well, 12 units per acre is less than 14 units per acre?
but you couldn't come in under RP3 because the maximum on that's 10.
except we allowed the reduction to 3,000,
Except you allow the reduction.
In that RP3.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. So
which is
we-
more than 10. That's the 14. So essentially, RP3 is 10 to 14
That's right.
units per acre.
Well, again, if you let me comment, that 14 is an average, so it could be because there's a big green space somewhere, so you might have,
True.
So So we're saying that could be 10 to 14.
You
Right.
could, you could still, you could keep it at 10, keep the lot sizes down because of the